Hi, this week I finally got round to watching Scream 6, the most recent in the postmodern slasher horror series. It started in 1996 with Wes Craven's original, written by Kevin Williamson, and it is still a classic. The following year, they released Scream 2, which riffed on the idea of horror sequels and how the characters can survive based on these rules. And that, I think, added a different perspective and worked very well. After that, however, it goes very steeply downhill. After a delay, we had Scream 3 in 2000, which plays with the idea of horror trilogies, although there aren't really any. And then in 2011, we had Scream 4, which doesn't really work because it's trying to do legacy sequels before they were a thing. In 2022, we had Scream 5, really simply as Scream, which tried to do an actual legacy sequel reboot, but it completely forgot the point of the original movie. By this point, it's trying to satirize something that doesn't really exist or doesn't really work. And most crucially, it's not funny. Um, Scream 6 comes from the same creative team, the Radio Silence partnership directing, and James Vanderbilt and Guy Husek, I think his name is, um, writing. And they have absolutely no concept that the Scream movies are meant to be funny. Scream 6 is a dry, humorless slog through increasingly absurd cliches. And the film is shockingly boring for what should be a horror movie thrill ride. We have flat characters, we have dull plot mechanics. It's far too complicated. It's far too long. It's over 2 hours long, which is always the death knell for horror, unless you're George Romero. Um, it sees the characters who survived the previous film now all in college together in New York. The Ghostface murders start again, and it turns out to be connected to things in their past, events of previous movies, with the characters attempting to do a new trilogy and do their new own version of Scream 2, where the characters went off to college last time. But there's no life to it. There's no comedy to it. The whole point of Scream was to balance satire of the horror genre with genuine scares. And this doesn't do either of them. It's not scary because there's no effort in creating interesting or engaging characters. And it's not funny because they make zero effort to actually have any humor or satire at all. The, the satirical idea is now so divorced from what the Scream movies are now. There's nothing left of them to grab onto. This is the sixth film in a series. At this point, there's little they can do with it that actually has any connection to the horror genre. What is it? What is it that they can spoof with a sixth film in the series? The the answer that I thought of perhaps was that future movies could have set pieces that are deliberately borrowed from earlier classic horror movies, and they could satirize the idea of the killer now being out of ideas and is just ripping off other movies because they're now so far down the line. You could have a shower scene like Psycho. You could have something from Friday the 13th, or something from Nightmare on Elm Street, or Les Diaboliques, or The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. You could have a detective story based around people who are film nerds and how deep their movie knowledge is, depending on how obscure the references are in the murders. There's a lot you could do with this if you had some imagination, if you had some wit and creativity. And instead, we have boring actors I can barely tell apart, boring characters, slow story that I don't follow and can't understand, everyone having their own storylines. And the result is something that is truly boring and a disgrace compared to what the original film was. Wes Craven has long since passed away. Kevin Williamson has no involvement with the movies, except he's come back to make Scream 7. Melissa Barrera, I think that's her name, was fired from Scream 7 after making comments that were deemed to be anti Semitic, but were actually just anti genocide regarding the ongoing situation in Gaza. And Jenna Ortega, her co star, had to quit the movie supposedly due to contractual conflicts with her series Wednesday. But this led to others dropping out of the movie. Christopher Landon, who was supposed to write and direct, decided to resign. And now the whole thing is being rethought from scratch as a new film directed by Kevin Williamson, but with one of the writers from the previous two films staying on board. I really can't imagine what that's going to be with Williamson directing but not writing. I don't really know what the point of that's going to be. But this is a movie series that is now on the verge of making its 7th installment when it ran out of ideas after its 2nd. It's a zombie franchise and it needs to be put out of its misery.